Can overfeeding be a good thing? Could the treatment you're using to save your fish be making things worse? There are things we believe to be wrong because of someone else's circumstances and experiences, but every aquarium is different, and every aquarium owner has their own unique knowledge given by their own unique circumstances. That's why for today's video, I would like to share some of the things that I believed were problems and spent so much time trying to fix when really there was nothing to be fixed. Is overfeeding really that bad? Well, if you're feeding more than your fish can eat, that extra food can break down in the aquarium, add extra nutrients to the tank, and those extra nutrients can create algae problems. So almost every time you watch a video about preventing algae, somewhere in there you are probably going to hear, "Don't overfeed." And I've said that myself. But the problem is that overfeeding doesn't mean the same thing in every aquarium. If you have a tank with only a few plants, a small number of fish, and nothing really eating whatever reaches the bottom, then feeding too much can become a problem, because a lot of that food is going to sit there and break down. But in a heavily planted aquarium, especially one with a good amount of scavengers, you can sometimes feed quite a bit more without causing any problems. And there can be some advantages to it. Your fish get plenty to eat, and whatever they don't finish can be picked up by Amano shrimp or Corydoras. Then whatever gets left behind eventually breaks down, and those nutrients can become available to your plants. So you might not even have to fertilize as much as you normally would. And feeding a little heavier can also support a larger scavenger crew. I'm not saying you should start dumping extra food into your aquarium. I'm saying that what counts as too much depends on the aquarium. You've probably heard the rule that you should only feed what your fish can finish within a minute or two. And for a lot of aquariums, that's useful advice. But if you're currently feeding more than that, your fish are healthy, your plants are growing well, and you are not fighting algae or water quality problems because of it, don't change what you're doing just because somebody tells you it's not the right way. If it's working in your aquarium, there's absolutely nothing you need to change. Is the medicine really helping? Quarantining new fish can be a pain. You need another aquarium, a separate filter, and most of the time, that tank is sitting there doing nothing. So this is a step that I've skipped many times. The problem is that shipping can be very stressful on fish, and sometimes you don't realize a new fish is sick until it's already in your aquarium. That's what I've made the biggest mistake, treating the entire tank because of one sick fish. I've done this many times, and I haven't had very good experiences with it. I've ended up losing fish and invertebrates that were completely healthy. And depending on what you're using, you might also have to remove chemical filtration from your filter before treatment. So now you're opening the filter, changing things around, adding medication to an established aquarium, all because of one fish. And after doing all that, I've still lost the fish plenty of times. So I've learned not to treat the entire aquarium. If I can remove the sick fish, I would much rather treat it separately. Even if I ended up losing that fish, at least I didn't expose every healthy fish, shrimp, and snail in the aquarium to a treatment they didn't need. And I understand that if you see signs of illness in a fish you've already added, there's always that fear that it might have already spread to the others. That's why the better solution is to avoid getting to that point. Quarantine your new fish before adding them to your aquarium. It is annoying, but it gives you time to wash them, make sure they are healthy, and treat them separately if something shows up. If you guys are enjoying the video, remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and get to more people who love this hobby. When you buy schooling fish, you are usually given a minimum number that you should keep together. The idea is that keeping fewer than that can make the fish stressed or uncomfortable. And that's useful information to have. But I've learned not to treat that number like a rule that has to be followed no matter what. This has happened to me several times with Otocinclus. Otocinclus can be difficult when you first bring them home, especially when you're dealing with wild-caught fish that have already gone through a lot before reaching your aquarium. You might start with a good-sized group, lose a couple during that first period, and now you are below the number you were told you should have. When that happened, I used to buy more. But over the years, I've had aquariums with only a few Otocinclus, and I've watched those fish stay alive, eat well, grow very large, and live out their normal lifespan. So instead of buying more fish just because I'm below someone else's recommended number, I look at the fish I already have. Are they eating? Are they active? Are they behaving normally? If everything looks good, I don't see a reason to change something that is working. Recommendations for group size are useful, especially when you're choosing a species for the first time. And in many cases, keeping a larger group is better for the fish. But that number isn't going to apply the same way in every aquarium. Maybe you have a smaller tank, or maybe you simply don't want that many of the same fish. If you want to try keeping a smaller group, do that. See how they behave, make sure they are not showing any signs of stress. If they are doing well, don't go out of your way to fix something that doesn't need fixing. For this one, we're going to look at another problem that doesn't need fixing, but I'll also show you what I do to avoid it altogether. A lot of aquarium plants are grown out of water before they are sold. Even when you see them underwater at a local fish store, you are probably still looking at their immersed growth. So you buy the plant because you like the way it looks, and a few weeks later, the submerged growth looks completely different. We talk a lot about plant melt during this transition, but something I don't think is talked about enough is how different the new growth can actually look. The leaves can change shape, the color can change, and sometimes the plant barely looks like the one you bought. And it's not because there's something wrong with your water parameters, that's simply how the plant grows on the water. I've had this happen with Proserpinaca palustris, usually called mermaid. I bought it from a local store, and once the submerged growth came in, it looked like a completely different plant. It was still beautiful, but it wasn't what I expected. The same thing can happen when you're buying plants online. A lot of the pictures you see are of immersed grown plants. So before I buy a plant online, I take the name, search for images of a growing submerged, and see what it's going to look like in my aquarium. Most of the time, you can find pictures somewhere, even if the store you're buying from doesn't show them. Then I can decide if I still want the plant before I buy it. This last one is about Amano shrimp, and this one got my hopes up the first time it happened. Before I bought Amanos, I already knew they normally wouldn't reproduce in a freshwater aquarium. What I didn't know was that the females would still carry eggs, and those eggs are very easy to see. So the first time I had a female full of eggs, I started thinking maybe something was different in my aquarium. Maybe they were doing so well that I was somehow going to end up with baby Amanos. Then one day, the eggs were gone, and there were no baby shrimp anywhere. Amano shrimp have a very peculiar reproductive cycle. The female carries the eggs until they hatch, but what comes out are tiny free-swimming larvae. In nature, those larvae are carried downstream toward brackish or saltwater, where they develop before eventually returning to freshwater as juveniles. In a normal freshwater aquarium, those larvae don't have the conditions they need to develop. So when the female suddenly isn't carrying eggs anymore, it doesn't mean you did something wrong. She most likely released them, and then the larvae simply weren't able to survive in freshwater. If you've ever had this happen, I totally understand the disappointment. I went through the same thing. But don't start changing your water parameters or trying to figure out what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. That is completely normal, and there's nothing for you to fix. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you've ever had something in your aquarium that looked like a problem, but turned out not to need any fixing, share it in the comments below. It might save someone else from making changes they never needed to make, and I'll see you all in the next one.